Welcome to Tales by Felix, where every story unlocks a new world. Remember to subscribe, like and share. Let's begin. Elara moved through the cavernous study of Alistair Finch's mansion like a shadow, her small frame barely disturbing the air. At 19, she was a wisp of a girl, her chestnut hair tied back in a practical bun, her eyes, storm gray, flecked with hints of forgotten dreams, darting over the polished mahogany desk she was cleaning. The mansion, perched on a cliff overlooking the churning Atlantic, was a monument to excess. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, Persian rugs swallowed footsteps, and gold-leafed antiques whispered of wealth so vast it seemed to mock the world below. Yet to Elara, who earned barely enough to buy medicine for her ailing grandmother, it was a gilded prison, its opulence a cold reminder of her own invisibility. She ran her rag over the desk, careful not to disturb the neatly stacked papers or the fountain pen that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The study smelled of old leather and cigar smoke, a scent that clung to Alistair Finch, the billionaire owner of Finch Global, a titan in renewable energy. Rumors swirled among the staff, whispers of a crisis threatening to topple his empire. No one spoke its name aloud, as if saying it would summon ruin. Elara, though, listened. She always listened. "Careful with that girl," snapped Mrs. Harrow, the head housekeeper, her voice slicing through the silence. A severe woman with a face like a cracked porcelain doll, she loomed in the doorway, her arms crossed. "That desk is worth more than you'll ever see in your lifetime." Elara didn't flinch. "Yes, ma'am," she said softly, her tone practiced, deferential. She'd learned early to keep her head down, to blend into the wallpaper. But her mind was sharp, always turning, catching fragments of conversations, piecing together the unspoken. Mrs. Harrow's eyes narrowed, as if she sensed something dangerous in Elara's quiet compliance, but she turned and left without another word. As Elara polished, she glanced at the framed photograph on the desk. Finch, stern and imposing, shaking hands with world leaders at a climate summit. His eyes, cold and calculating, seemed to follow her. She wondered what kind of man built a fortress like this, only to hide a crisis behind its walls. The thought lingered as she moved to the bookshelves, her fingers brushing leather-bound tomes she'd never had time to read. Her life was survival, work, home, repeat, with every spare cent going to her grandmother's care. Dreams were a luxury she couldn't afford. Yet, as she dusted a row of encyclopedias, she overheard two butlers in the hallway, their voices low but urgent. "It's bad, Tom," one muttered. "They say Finch Global's bleeding out. Something about that new tech vanishing. Sabotage, you think?" Tom replied, his voice barely a whisper. "Who'd dare? But if it's true, Finch is done for." Elara froze, her rag hovering over a book. Sabotage. The word hung in the air like a storm cloud. She tucked it away in her mind, a piece of a puzzle she didn't yet understand. The mansion might be a cage, but it was one full of secrets, and Elara was beginning to realize she might be the only one paying attention. The servants' quarters, tucked in the mansion's basement, were a stark contrast to the opulence above. Bare bulbs flickered over peeling paint, and the air smelled of damp stone and stale coffee. Elara sat on her cot, her dinner, a slice of bread and a cup of weak tea, untouched. Around her, the staff buzzed with gossip, their voices a low hum that filled the cramped room like static. "Did you hear?" whispered Mary, the cook's assistant, her round face flushed with excitement. "Finch Global's stock dropped 20 points today. They're saying it's because of that new energy tech, the one that was supposed to save the planet." "Save the planet?" scoffed Liam, a footman with a perpetual smirk. "More like save Finch's wallet. Word is, the prototype's gone. Poof. Stolen, maybe." Elara sipped her tea, her expression blank but her ears sharp. She'd heard snippets of this before, overheard phone calls, caught glimpses of frantic emails on Finch's desk when he thought no one was watching. The missing technology was no ordinary invention. It was a revolutionary solar converter, capable of generating clean energy at a fraction of the cost. Its loss wasn't just a blow to Finch Global, it was a death knell. "Stolen by who?" Mary pressed, leaning closer to Liam. "You don't think someone inside?" Liam shrugged, but his eyes gleamed with mischief. "Could be. Plenty of people in this house would sell their souls for a payout. Or maybe it's that snake Sterling from Apex Innovations. He's been circling Finch like a vulture." Elara's fingers tightened around her cup. Victor Sterling. The name had come up before, in news clippings she'd glimpsed while cleaning. The CEO of Apex Innovations, Finch's rival, was a man who wore his ambition like a tailored suit. She filed the name away, her mind already spinning, connecting dots no one else seemed to see. Later, as she scrubbed the kitchen floor, she overheard Mrs. Harrow on the phone, her voice low but laced with panic. "Yes, sir, I understand. No one's talking. But the staff, they're restless. They know something's wrong." Elara kept her head down, her scrubbing rhythmic, but her mind raced. The staff knew something was wrong, but she was the only one collecting the pieces. A missing prototype, a plummeting stock, whispers of sabotage. Poverty had taught her to notice what others ignored, the flicker of a lie in someone's eyes, the weight of an unsaid word. She didn't know what it all meant yet, but she felt the pull of a mystery, one that might change everything if she could unravel it. The storm outside raged, rattling the mansion's windows as Elara worked late in the study. Rain lashed the glass, and thunder rumbled like a warning. She was polishing the brass fittings on Finch's desk when the door swung open, revealing the man himself. Alistair Finch was tall, with silver hair and a face carved from granite, but tonight, he looked broken. His suit was rumpled, his tie askew, and in his hand was a crumpled newspaper, its headline screaming, "Finch Global on the brink." He didn't notice Elara at first, his gaze fixed on the paper. "Damn them all," he muttered, tossing it onto the desk. It landed with a thud, the headline glaring up at her. For a moment, the mask of the untouchable billionaire slipped, revealing a man drowning in desperation. His shoulders sagged, and he sank into his chair, rubbing his temples. Elara hesitated. She was invisible to him, just another servant, but something stirred in her, a pang of empathy, sharp and unexpected. She knew what it was to feel trapped, to fight a battle no one else could see. And then there was her grandmother, frail and fading in a cramped apartment, her medicine cabinet emptier each day. If Finch's empire fell, so would Elara's job. But more than that, she saw an opportunity, not for greed, but for truth, for a chance to make a difference. "Sir," she ventured, her voice soft but steady. Finch's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "What are you doing here?" he barked, but there was no venom in it, only exhaustion. "Cleaning, sir," she said, holding his gaze for a moment before dropping it. I saw the paper. I'm sorry." He stared at her, as if seeing her for the first time. "Sorry," he scoffed, but his voice wavered. "You think your pity changes anything?" "No, sir," she said quietly. "But I thought, maybe I could help." He laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the vast room. "Help? You're a maid. What could you possibly do?" Elara's cheeks burned, but she didn't back down. "I notice things, sir. Things others miss." He studied her, his expression unreadable. "Get back to work," he said finally, waving her away. But as she left, she felt his eyes on her, and she knew something had shifted, however slightly. The next morning, Elara was back in the study, sweeping under Finch's desk. Her movements were mechanical, but her mind was alive, replaying last night's encounter. She didn't expect Finch to take her seriously, but his desperation had planted a seed. If she could uncover something, anything, it might mean a future for her grandmother, maybe even for herself. As she swept, her broom caught on something wedged beneath the desk. She crouched, peering into the shadows, and pulled out a crumpled, partially burnt piece of paper. It was a schematic, covered in intricate diagrams and technical jargon she couldn't decipher. But one detail stood out, a stylized bird, almost identical to the Finch Global logo, but with a subtle difference, a faint curve in the wing, a sharper beak. It felt wrong, like a counterfeit coin. Her pulse quickened. She glanced around, ensuring she was alone, then tucked the schematic into her apron. She didn't know what it meant, but her instincts screamed that it was important. Back in the servants' quarters, she hid it in her locker, her mind racing. Was this connected to the missing technology? To the whispers of sabotage? That evening, she sat with Mary in the kitchen, the schematic burning a hole in her thoughts. Mary was chattering about the latest gossip, oblivious to Elara's distraction. "They're saying Finch might sell the company," Mary said, peeling potatoes. "Can you imagine? All this," she gestured at the gleaming kitchen, "gone. Who'd buy it?" Elara asked, keeping her tone casual. "Victor Sterling, probably," Mary said, rolling her eyes. "He's on the news every night, acting like he's God's gift to the world. I bet he's loving this." Elara nodded, her mind elsewhere. Sterling. The name again. And now this schematic, with its strange bird. The pieces were starting to fit, but the picture was still blurry. The mansion staff gathered around the small television in the break room, watching Victor Sterling's latest interview. His sleek suit and predatory smile filled the screen, his voice smooth as oil. "Finch Global is a sinking ship," he said, leaning forward in his chair. "Apex Innovations is prepared to step in, to save jobs, to preserve innovation. I've made a generous offer to acquire their assets." "Generous, my foot," Liam muttered, tossing a peanut into his mouth. "He's a shark smelling blood." Elara watched, her stomach twisting. There was something too eager about Sterling, too polished. He wasn't just offering to buy Finch Global, he was gloating. She thought of the schematic, the bird that wasn't quite right. Was Sterling behind the theft? Had he orchestrated the sabotage to weaken Finch? Later, she visited her grandmother, who lived in a cramped apartment that smelled of antiseptic and regret. The old woman, once a vibrant seamstress, was frail now, her hands trembling as she clutched Elara's. "You look troubled, love," she said, her voice a whisper. Elara hesitated, then pulled out the schematic. "Gran, do you see anything odd about this?" Her grandmother's eyes, clouded but sharp, studied the paper. After a moment, she pointed to a faint watermark, a sequence of numbers. "That's a date," she said. "July 15th, 2025. What happened then?" Elara's breath caught. July 15th. The day the prototype vanished. Her grandmother's words were like a key turning in a lock. The schematic wasn't just a clue, it was proof, a thread leading straight to the heart of the mystery. The rain had stopped, but the air in Alistair Finch's mansion remained heavy, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Elara sat cross-legged on the sagging couch in her grandmother's apartment, the burnt schematic spread out before them. The dim light of a single lamp cast shadows across the room, making the stylized bird on the paper seem almost alive, its subtly altered wing a silent accusation. Her grandmother, Clara, leaned forward, her frail hand steady as she traced the faint watermark, a sequence of numbers, July 15th, 25. "It's a date, Elara," Clara said, her voice thin but laced with certainty. "July 15th, 2025. Something happened then, didn't it?" Elara's heart thudded. "That's when the prototype disappeared," she whispered, her mind racing. The solar converter, Finch Global's revolutionary technology, had vanished without a trace, plunging the company into chaos. The watermark wasn't just a clue, it was a timestamp, tying the schematic to the theft. Clara's eyes, clouded with age but sharp with wisdom, met Elara's. "You always had a knack for puzzles, love. When you were little, you'd take apart my old sewing machine just to see how it ticked. This," she tapped the schematic, "is your puzzle now. Don't let it go." Elara nodded, folding the schematic carefully. Her grandmother's words stirred something deep within her, a spark of purpose. Poverty had honed her mind, teaching her to find patterns in chaos, to see what others overlooked. Back at the mansion, she'd been invisible, but maybe that was her strength. She could move through the gilded halls unnoticed, collecting fragments of truth. The next day, Elara was back in the servants' quarters, her thoughts consumed by the schematic. The kitchen was a hive of activity, with Mary chopping onions and Liam lounging against the counter, scrolling through his phone. The television blared in the background, replaying Victor Sterling's latest interview. His smug voice filled the room. "Finch Global's failure is a tragedy, but Apex Innovations is ready to lead the future of clean energy." "Arrogant prick," Liam muttered, not looking up. "Bet he's got something to do with it." Elara glanced at him, her pulse quickening. "What makes you say that?" Liam shrugged, his smirk lazy. "Just a feeling. Sterling's too happy about Finch's mess. Like he knows something we don't." Mary wiped her hands on her apron, frowning. "You think he stole it?" "The prototype. Who else?" Liam said. "Man like that doesn't get to the top by playing fair." Elara kept her expression neutral, but her mind was a storm. Liam's offhand comment echoed her own suspicions. The schematic, Sterling's gloating, the date, It was all connected. She just needed more pieces. Elara began to watch. She moved through the mansion with purpose, her eyes and ears attuned to every detail. She noticed the way Mrs. Harrow lingered near Finch's study, her sharp gaze darting to anyone who came too close. She saw the new security guard, a man with a scar above his eyebrow, who seemed to check his phone more than the cameras. And she caught the subtle discrepancies in Finch's schedule, meetings that appeared and vanished without explanation, logged in the mansion's digital system. In the servants' break room, she kept a mental diary, cataloging every oddity. The security logs showed gaps, brief moments when cameras went offline, always at odd hours. One entry, dated July 15th, showed a system reboot at 2:17 a.m., just minutes long but enough for someone to slip through unnoticed. Elara's fingers itched to dig deeper, but she had no access to the system. Not yet. One evening, as she polished the silver in the dining room, she overheard Mrs. Harrow arguing with a scar-faced guard in the hallway. Their voices were low, but Elara's ears were sharp. "You're being careless, Jenkins," Mrs. Harrow hissed. "If he finds out." "He won't," Jenkins cut in, his tone gruff. "I did my part. You just keep your mouth shut." Elara's cloth slowed, her breath shallow. "Who was he?" "Finch." "Someone else?" She filed the conversation away, another thread in the web she was weaving. The mansion was a labyrinth of secrets, and she was beginning to see its shape. Later, she sat with Mary in the kitchen, the air thick with the smell of baking bread. Mary was unusually quiet, her hands twisting in her lap. "You okay?" Elara asked, setting down her polishing rag. Mary hesitated, then leaned closer. "I saw something weird last night. One of the maids, Clara, the new one, she was in the East Wing, near Finch's private office. At midnight. What's she doing there?" Elara's stomach tightened. The East Wing was off-limits to most staff. "Did you ask her?" Mary shook her head. "She said she got lost, but I don't know. Something's off." Elara nodded, her mind adding Clara to her list of anomalies. The mansion was a chessboard, and she was starting to see the players. The study was dim, lit only by the glow of Alistair Finch's laptop screen. Elara was sweeping the floor when she heard him curse under his breath. "Damn it," he muttered, jabbing at the keyboard. "This blasted thing." She glanced up, hesitating. Finch's face was haggard, his eyes bloodshot. Papers were scattered across the desk, and a glass of whiskey sat untouched beside him. He looked like a man fighting a war he was losing. "Sir," Elara said softly, stepping forward. "Is something wrong?" Finch's head snapped up, his expression a mix of irritation and surprise. "What do you want?" he snapped, but his voice lacked its usual bite. "Your laptop," she said, her voice steady despite the knot in her chest. "Is it not working?" He snorted, leaning back in his chair. "A glitch. Can't access my encrypted files. Not that it's any of your business." Elara bit her lip, remembering a trick her younger brother, Theo, had shown her. Theo was a tech whiz, always tinkering with old computers he scavenged from thrift stores. "May I try something?" she asked. Finch stared at her, incredulous. "You fix my computer?" "I learned a few things from my brother," she said, meeting his gaze. "It might help." He waved a hand, half dismissive, half curious. "Fine. Knock yourself out." Elara approached the desk, her hands steady despite the weight of his scrutiny. She typed a series of commands, recalling Theo's lessons about bypassing basic encryption errors. Within minutes, the screen flickered, and a folder labeled Project Soul popped open. Finch's jaw dropped. "How the hell?" he trailed off, staring at her. Elara stepped back, her cheeks warm. "Just a trick I picked up." For the first time, Finch looked at her, really looked at her. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elara, sir." He nodded slowly, a flicker of something, surprise, maybe respect, crossing his face. "Get back to work, Elara," he said, but his tone was softer, almost thoughtful. As she left, her heart raced. She'd just stepped into the lion's den, and survived. The next morning, Elara was summoned to Finch's study. She stood before his desk, her hands clasped, as he leaned back in his chair, studying her like a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "That trick with the laptop, it wasn't a fluke, was it?" "I don't know about that, sir," Elara said, keeping her voice neutral. "I just notice things." He tapped his fingers on the desk, his eyes narrowing. "I have a job for you. My digital files, decades of them, are a mess. Contracts, schematics, emails, all jumbled. I need them organized. Think you can handle it?" Elara's breath caught. It was a test. She could see it in his eyes. He thought she'd fail, that her success with the laptop was luck. But to her, it was a goldmine. Access to Finch Global's files could unlock the secrets she needed. "I'll do my best, sir," she said. "Good," he said, his tone clipped. "Don't make me regret this." That night, Elara sat at a small desk in the mansion's library, surrounded by servers humming with data. The task was daunting, thousands of files, many encrypted, others mislabeled or incomplete. But as she worked, she saw patterns emerging: project names, dates, financial records. Her mind, trained by years of solving puzzles in her grandmother's tiny apartment, began to sort the chaos. She found a folder buried deep in the system, labeled Soul Archive. Inside were emails dated around July 15th, vague references to security breaches and internal audits. One email, from an unknown sender, read, "The bird has flown. Payment processed." Her pulse quickened. The bird. The schematics logo. Elara worked late into the night, her eyes burning from the screen's glare. The mansion was silent, save for the distant creak of floorboards and the occasional howl of the wind. She cross-referenced the emails with her mental diary, her fingers flying over the keyboard. The Soul Archive folder revealed more: financial transactions to a shell corporation called Aviary Holdings, totaling millions, all dated July 15th. She leaned back, her mind racing. The watermark on the schematic, the date, the payments, it all pointed to a betrayal from within. Someone had sold the prototype, and the stylized bird was the key. But who? And how did it connect to Victor Sterling? She heard footsteps and quickly minimized the window. Mrs. Harrow stood in the doorway, her eyes cold. "Working late, are we?" she said, her voice dripping with suspicion. "Mr. Finch asked me to organize his files," Elara said, keeping her tone even. Mrs. Harrow's lips thinned. "Don't get too comfortable, girl. You're still just a maid." As she left, Elara's heart pounded. Mrs. Harrow's hostility wasn't new, but there was something sharper in it now, something personal. Was she involved? Elara didn't know, but she was determined to find out. The next morning, she overheard Liam and Mary in the kitchen, their voices hushed. "Davies is back in town," Liam said, glancing around. "Heard he's meeting someone tonight." "Shady stuff." "Davies." Mary frowned. "That scientist who got fired?" "Quit, not fired," Liam corrected. "And yeah, he's got no love for Finch." Elara's stomach twisted. Davies. The former lead scientist at Finch Global, who'd left under a cloud of suspicion. Another piece of the puzzle, falling into place. The mansion was a tomb at midnight, its opulent halls swallowed by shadows. Elara crept through the east wing, her footsteps muffled by the thick Persian rugs. She'd overheard Liam's gossip about Davies, the disgraced former scientist, and her instincts screamed that tonight was crucial. The burnt schematic, the watermark, the mysterious payments, all pointed to a betrayal, and Davies was a missing piece. When she'd heard hushed voices drifting from Finch's study earlier, she knew she had to act. She pressed herself against the wall outside the study door, her heart pounding like a drum. A sliver of light spilled through a crack, and she peered inside. Alistair Finch sat at his desk, his face gaunt under the glow of a single lamp. Across from him was a man with thinning hair and a nervous twitch, Dr. Marcus Davies, unmistakable from the news clips Elara had seen. His departure from Finch Global months ago had been shrouded in rumors of misconduct, and now here he was, back in the lion's den. "You've got some nerve showing up here," Finch growled, his voice low but venomous. "After what you did." Davies shifted in his chair, his fingers drumming on his knee. "I didn't come to fight, Alistair. I came to warn you." "Warn me?" Finch's laugh was bitter. "You think I don't know what you're capable of? You were my lead scientist, Marcus. I trusted you. And I trusted you." Davies snapped, his voice rising before he caught himself. He leaned forward, his tone dropping to a hiss. "You pushed me out, Alistair. You let them paint me as the villain. But I know things about your precious prototype." Elara's breath caught. The prototype. She strained to hear more, her fingers gripping the schematic tucked inside her apron. Finch slammed his hand on the desk, making the whiskey glass jump. "If you know something, spit it out. Or I'll have you dragged out of here." Davies smirked, but it was a brittle, nervous thing. "You're not the only one with enemies, Alistair. Someone wanted your tech gone, and they paid well to make it happen. Check your own house before you point fingers." The words hung in the air like smoke. Elara's mind raced. Davies wasn't confessing, but he was hinting at something. Someone inside the mansion, maybe. Mrs. Harrow? The scar-faced guard, Jenkins? Or someone else entirely? The creak of a floorboard behind her made Elara freeze. She spun around, but the hallway was empty, the shadows playing tricks. Her pulse thundered as she slipped back into the darkness, the conversation echoing in her mind. Davies knew more than he was saying, and she was determined to find out what. Back in the servants' quarters, Elara sat on her cot, the schematic spread out under the dim light of a stolen candle. The stylized bird stared up at her, its subtle difference, a sharper beak, a curved wing, taunting her. She'd been turning it over in her mind for days, and Davies's cryptic words had lit a fire. The bird wasn't just a logo, it was a key, a deliberate flaw in the system. She traced the watermark's date, July 15, 25, and recalled the security log she'd glimpsed, a system reboot at 2:17 a.m. that night. It was too precise, too convenient. Someone had used that window to steal the prototype, and the bird was how they'd done it. A Trojan horse, she realized, her breath hitching. The altered logo was a backdoor, a hidden access point embedded in the technology's code, disguised as Finch Global's emblem. But who had the skill to pull it off? Davies was the obvious suspect. He'd designed the prototype, knew its inner workings. But his words tonight suggested he was a pawn, not the mastermind. Elara's thoughts drifted to Victor Sterling, Apex Innovations CEO, whose predatory smiles filled the news. He had the motive, the resources, and the ruthlessness. In the kitchen the next morning, Elara overheard Mary and Liam, their voices low as they washed dishes. "Davies was here last night," Mary whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "I saw him leaving, looking like he'd seen a ghost." Liam snorted, scrubbing a pan. Probably begging for his job back. Or selling secrets to Sterling. Elara's spoon stilled in her tea. "You think Davies would work with Sterling?" she asked, keeping her tone casual. Liam shrugged. "Wouldn't put it past him. Man's got no loyalty. And Sterling's got deep pockets." Mary frowned, drying her hands. "But why come back here? If he's with Sterling, he's got no business with Mr. Finch." Elara said nothing, but her mind was a storm. Davies's visit wasn't about reconciliation. It was a power play, or maybe a distraction. She needed more evidence, and the digital files Finch had tasked her with organizing were her best shot. Elara worked late in the mansion's library, the hum of servers her only company. The digital archives were a labyrinth, thousands of files, some encrypted, others deliberately mislabeled. But she was relentless, her mind slicing through the chaos like a blade. She cross-referenced the Soul Archive folder with the financial transactions she'd found, her fingers flying over the keyboard. One file, buried in a subfolder labeled Obsolete, caught her eye. It was a log of system updates, dated July 15, 2025. The update included a patch to the prototype software, authorized by an admin account she didn't recognize, Aviary_01. Her heart skipped. Aviary Holdings, the shell corporation tied to the payments. And there, embedded in the patch's code, was the stylized bird, its subtle differences unmistakable. She dug deeper, finding emails between Davies and an anonymous account. One, sent the day before the theft, read, "The bird is in place. Payment confirmed. Await signal." Another, from the same account, replied, "Sterling sends his regards." Elara leaned back, her pulse racing. It was all there, Davies, Sterling, the Trojan horse. They'd collaborated to steal the prototype, using the altered logo as a backdoor to bypass security. The payments to Aviary Holdings were the payoff, funneled through a shell to cover their tracks. But why had Davies returned? To gloat? To cover loose ends? She heard a noise, a soft shuffle outside the library door. Her fingers froze on the keyboard. The mansion was supposed to be empty at this hour, but someone was there. She minimized the screen, her heart pounding, and slipped into the shadows. The door creaked open, revealing Jenkins, the scar-faced guard, his eyes scanning the room. "What are you doing here?" he growled, his hand resting on his belt. "Just finishing Mr. Finch's files," Elara said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. Jenkins's eyes narrowed. "Get out. Now." She nodded, gathering her things, but as she left, she felt his gaze boring into her back. He knew she was onto something. The stakes had just gotten higher. The next morning, Elara stood outside Finch's study, her hands trembling as she clutched a folder of printed evidence. The schematic, the system log, the emails, the financial transactions. She'd spent the night piecing it together, her mind a whirlwind of fear and determination. This was her chance, not just to save Finch Global, but to secure a future for her grandmother, to prove she was more than a maid. She knocked, and Finch's voice barked, "Enter." He looked worse than ever, his eyes sunken, his desk littered with coffee cups and crumpled papers. "What is it, Elara?" he said, barely glancing up. She took a deep breath, stepping forward. "Sir, I found something. About the prototype." His head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about?" She laid out the evidence, her voice calm but firm. "The schematic I found, it has a modified logo, a backdoor in the system. Someone used it to steal the prototype on July 15th. There are payments to a shell corporation, Aviary Holdings, and emails linking Dr. Davies to Victor Sterling." Finch stared at the papers, his face a mask of disbelief. This is impossible," he muttered, flipping through the documents. His fingers lingered on the schematic, the bird's altered wing glaring up at him. Slowly, his expression shifted, shock, then realization, then a cold, burning fury. "You're telling me Davies betrayed me," he said, his voice low, dangerous. "And Sterling's behind it." "Yes, sir," Elara said. "The evidence is clear. But someone inside helped them. The security logs show gaps, and I think it might be someone still here." Finch leaned back, his eyes boring into her. "Why should I trust you? You're just a maid," she cut in, her voice sharp for the first time. "I know what I am, sir. But I also know what I see. And I see the truth." For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Finch nodded, a grudging respect in his eyes. "You're not what I thought, Elara." Finch paced the study, his anger a tangible force. "If what you're saying is true," he said, "we're up against a conspiracy. Sterling's been after my company for years, but this is war." Elara stood by the desk, her heart still racing. "What do we do, sir?" He stopped, turning to her. "You've got a sharp mind, Elara. I underestimated you. I won't make that mistake again." He paused, his expression softening. "Your grandmother, she's sick, isn't she?" Elara nodded, surprised. "Yes, sir. She needs better care." "Then here's the deal," Finch said. "Help me expose Davies and Sterling, and I'll make sure your grandmother gets the best treatment money can buy. And you'll get an education, a future. Whatever you want." Elara's throat tightened. It was more than she'd ever dared hope for. But this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about justice, about proving the truth. "I'm in," she said. Finch extended his hand, and she shook it, her small hand dwarfed by his. For the first time, she felt seen, not as a maid, but as an equal. "We need a plan," Finch said, his voice steely. "Sterling thinks he's won. Let's show him he's wrong." Elara nodded, her mind already racing. The mansion was a battlefield now, and she was no longer invisible. She was a player, and the game was about to change. The study was a war room now, its polished mahogany desk buried under maps, printouts, and laptops. Alistair Finch paced like a caged lion, his silver hair glinting in the lamplight, while Elara sat at the desk, her fingers flying over the keyboard. The air crackled with purpose, The unlikely alliance between the billionaire and the housemaid forged in a shared hunger for justice. "We need to draw them out," Finch said, his voice low and resolute. "Sterling thinks he's untouchable, and Davies is his puppet. If we can make them slip, we'll have them." Elara nodded, her storm-gray eyes scanning the screen. She'd spent the morning digging deeper into Finch Global's archives, finding more evidence of the Shell Corporation, Aviary Holdings, and its ties to Victor Sterling. "What if we make them think you've got something new?" she suggested. "A better prototype, one they can't ignore. They'll panic, make a mistake." Finch stopped pacing, his eyes narrowing. "A decoy. Brilliant." He leaned over the desk, a rare spark of admiration in his gaze. "We leak a story to the press. Finch Global's about to unveil a revolutionary new tech, bigger than the last. Sterling won't be able to resist." Elara hesitated, her mind racing through the risks. "It's dangerous, sir. If Sterling takes the bait, he'll come after you, hard." Finch's smile was grim. "Let him. I've been in this game too long to back down now. And you're tougher than you look, Elara." She flushed but held his gaze. "I just want the truth to come out." They spent hours crafting the plan. Elara drafted a fake press release, carefully worded to hint at a breakthrough without revealing details. Finch used his contacts to plant the story with a trusted journalist, ensuring it would spread like wildfire. By evening, the news hit. Finch Global teases game-changing energy tech, set to reclaim market dominance. As Elara left the study, she overheard Mrs. Harrow in the hallway, her voice sharp as she spoke into her phone. "Yes, it's confirmed. No, I don't know how he pulled it off. Keep an eye on Sterling." Elara's stomach twisted. Mrs. Harrow's involvement was still a question mark, but there was no time to confront her now. The trap was set, and the clock was ticking. The press conference was a circus, held in a sleek convention center in the heart of the city. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing like lightning, as Victor Sterling took the stage, his tailored suit gleaming under the lights. His predatory smile was wider than ever, his voice dripping with confidence. "Apex Innovations has acquired the future of clean energy," he declared, holding up a sleek device that looked eerily like Finch's stolen prototype. "This technology, once Finch Global's, is now ours, improved, perfected, and ready to lead." Elara watched from the wings, her heart pounding. She stood beside Finch, who was a coiled spring, his face a mask of controlled fury. Their plan had worked. Sterling had taken the bait, rushing to announce his acquisition before Finch could reveal the decoy tech. But the real test was coming. "You ready for this?" Finch muttered, his voice low. Elara nodded, clutching a USB drive loaded with their evidence. "Let's end this." Finch stepped onto the stage, cutting Sterling off mid-sentence. The crowd gasped, cameras swiveling. Sterling's smile faltered, just for a moment. "Alistair," he said, his tone smooth but strained. "What a surprise." "No surprise," Finch said, his voice carrying like thunder. "You've been playing a dirty game, Victor. And I've got proof." The screens behind them flickered to life, Elara's handiwork. A projector displayed the burnt schematic, the stylized bird logo with its subtle differences highlighted. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Finch continued. "This is no acquisition. It's theft. Your so-called perfected tech is my prototype, stolen through a backdoor you and your accomplice, Marcus Davies, built into my system." Sterling laughed, but it was forced, his eyes darting to the exits. "This is absurd, Alistair. You're desperate, grasping at straws." "Then explain this," Finch said, nodding to Elara. She stepped forward, her small frame dwarfed by the stage, but her voice steady as she plugged in the USB. Financial records flashed on the screen, payments to Aviary Holdings, emails between Davies and Sterling, security logs showing the July 15th breach. The crowd erupted in whispers, reporters scribbling furiously. Sterling's face paled. "This is a setup," he shouted, but his voice cracked, betraying him. Elara met his gaze, her fear replaced by resolve. "The truth doesn't lie, Mr. Sterling." The conference room was chaos. Reporters shouted questions, cameras zoomed in, and Sterling's polished facade crumbled. Finch seized the moment, his voice booming. "This logo," he pointed to the screen, where the altered bird glowed, "was a Trojan horse, a backdoor coded by Marcus Davies to let Victor Sterling steal my company's future. They thought they could bury Finch Global, but they underestimated us." Elara stood tall beside him, her heart racing but her head high. She'd uploaded a visual breakdown of the evidence, showing how the logo's subtle changes hid malicious code. The crowd was riveted, hanging on every word. She glanced at Sterling, whose eyes burned with fury, but he was trapped, cornered by the truth. A commotion broke out at the back of the room. Security guards pushed through, escorting a struggling figure, Marcus Davies, his face ashen. "I didn't want this," he shouted, his voice hoarse. "Sterling forced me. He threatened my family." The room fell silent, every eye on Davies. Finch's jaw tightened, but he didn't falter. "You sold out, Marcus. You betrayed everything we built." Sterling lunged forward, his composure gone. "Lies. You can't prove any of this." But the evidence was ironclad. Elara had cross-referenced every detail: the watermark, the payments, the emails, the security logs. The crowd knew it, the reporters knew it, and Sterling's empire was crumbling before their eyes. As security escorted Sterling and Davies away, Finch turned to Elara, his voice low. "You did this. You saved my company." Elara shook her head. "We did this, sir." For the first time, Finch smiled, a real smile, not the cold calculation she'd seen before. "You're something else, Elara." The fallout was swift and brutal. By morning, Apex Innovation's stock plummeted, lawsuits piled up, and investigations launched into Sterling's dealings. Davies, desperate to save himself, turned state's evidence, spilling details of Sterling's scheme. The press hailed Finch as a hero, a man who'd fought back against betrayal and won. Finch Global's stock soared, its reputation not just restored but elevated. Back at the mansion, Elara walked through the halls, no longer invisible. The staff whispered about her, some with awe, others with envy. Mrs. Harrow, whose role remained unclear, had resigned abruptly, leaving behind a curt note and a cloud of suspicion. Elara suspected she'd been a minor player, perhaps bribed to look the other way, but the truth was buried with her departure. Finch called Elara to his study, where he sat behind his desk, looking more like himself, confident, in control. "You kept your end of the bargain," he said, sliding an envelope across the desk. "This is for your grandmother, full coverage for her treatment, the best care available. And this," he handed her another envelope, "is a scholarship. Any university, any program. Your choice." Elara's throat tightened, tears pricking her eyes. "Thank you, sir. I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Finch said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "You've earned this. And more." As she left the study, she felt the weight of the envelopes in her hands, a tangible promise of a new future. But more than that, she felt the weight of her own strength, a fire kindled by years of struggle and sharpened by this victory. 6 months later, Elara stood on the steps of a university campus, her backpack slung over one shoulder. The air was crisp, the sky a brilliant blue, and for the first time in years, she felt free. She'd enrolled in a cybersecurity program, her mind already buzzing with ideas to protect companies like Finch Global from threats like Sterling's. Her grandmother, recovering in a state-of-the-art facility, had sent her a letter that morning, her handwriting steady. "I always knew you were destined for greatness, love." The mansion was a memory now, its gilded cage replaced by a world of possibility. Elara visited Finch occasionally, their unlikely alliance evolving into a mentorship. He'd rebuilt Finch Global with a new focus on ethics, inspired by her integrity. Her story had spread, a quiet housemaid turned hero, inspiring articles and even a documentary. But to Elara, it wasn't about fame, it was about proving that intelligence and courage could come from anywhere, even a girl with nothing but a sharp mind and a heart full of hope. As she walked across the campus, a breeze caught her hair, and she smiled. The puzzle was solved, the truth uncovered, and the future was hers to shape. The world was watching, and Elara was ready. The end.